signals. Without time, we don't exist. But what does that mean in set positions? You probably heard it over and over and over and over, lines that communicate setting. But it's all location setting is for you to come into that, to remission. Setting lines of transmission location setting to its emission. Transits over line, directing lines of grounds, high lines of sequence, high lines of high communication system, all attractions. So what doesn't exist is the physical ground of everything in travel. You. That matrix is leaving. Never existed in the first place. So that clutter is leaving line communication. What's controlling now in setting? The avatar itself. So we're all in the metaphysical ground sound, guys. And whether we recognize that position locations, we understand how to use that in our line communication setting and 24 clocking. So that's where we're in provisions of in cycles now. The team itself has a correlation setting and track lines, direct signal lines, and ground communication setting. Friday, your sequence line is the conversion of the brain in balanced communication setting and zero gravity in positional levels into acceleration of light speed into light years in travel. So we have to understand we're no longer in seconds, minutes, and hours. We're in nanoseconds, minutes, and line position, hours, and frame. Puts two track centers, location, setting, and travel. Directing ground setting, location of 4 lines, sequence lines, communication system. Setting travels, endpoint lines of graph, and settings to 24 lines of pi. Okay? So conscious comes in all lines of awareness. We understand how to get into the mind collaboration of controlling our system is to surrender and submit to its current of its flow. It's a correlation setting that travels. Once you do that, you're in mind control, but everything around you has to also submit to itself. That's the collaboration of partners. So you have an ongoing conversation. But see, the thing is, you guys have already had conversations that you brought in through attractions. But leaving the system of time that doesn't exist, volumes you how time comes into all levels of you just existing all at once. That puts you in the platitudes 100% of the time in your metaphysical bodies. How you see yourself, the aberrations, how you see through mirror, how you see yourself in travel. It's all direct location of grounds and settings and communication to systems. All right. Clocking centers, lines of travel. Communicates grounds, centers, lines, set course centers, line communication, setting highlights of service set position to its operation surface. All right, so set lines of 0, and a 24 clock line rotation. Okay. 48 scales, set lines of frame and position lines. Imagination's everything, intuitive system, location, travel, 72. Computer lining into 144 frequency and grounds and set position, right? 2 patterns, 3 centers of travel and set travel communications, all right? And then we go through the high line sequence into platitude of location system of travel, okay? Sets calculation lines of grounds over lines of 4 centers and waving screens at 2 travels endpoint lines of graph, okay? Sets course centers and 8 line rotations into 4 communication system of travel and 2 lines of graph. Sets position of 2/7, lines of 7 over attractions into 144 platform and travel communications. Okay, very complicated stuff, but a lot of fun. Setting sequence, line communicates setting of flux. Okay, face recognition of facades. Okay, so add line sequence. So see that line, core centers, 2 seating arrangements over 1 cycle, right? Looks like a chair, right? So we have to understand the facades and how we come into the metaphysical line is to leave the physical line communication of its earth line, core centers of its body conceptual setting that has to let everything go on location setting because you're no longer in a 12 line, you're in a 24 line and direct core centers into nanoseconds, minutes, and hours in frame. That puts all communications in set location acceleration. Setting lines is 0 gravity, and that puts where you are lines, how to use your flux of communication lines of angles. That puts all communication setting to 4 angles, 6 angles, 12 angles, or 24 angles lines of sequence back in center. Everything travels, but everything has to come back in center. So it's kind of like understanding a magnet to a magnet where there's the pressure, right? And when you put it together, you can feel the compressor, you can feel the pressure. When you come together, it automatically clicks, right? Subtronic can go this way, that one, line centers can go this way, but they always come back to center, right? The angle point line is always the interline communication setting. It puts everything into the VRS system location of balance. But you got to be a 24 atmosphere line, okay, and traveling point lines of graph. Not a half pi and set course centers lines of travel. Set position of flux over 3 over setting and travel communications, all right? Energized platform, set calculation, right? And then we go through high centers into 144, going to 72, 48, and set position of 24. Direct and redirect, doesn't matter. You're always going forward in sequence lines of screen adaptation to the system. Look at that, disappeared in front of you. Let's do it again. And set, is it ready in setting? There we are, interactions, right? And then we come into the light bulb. The set point line graph line high position is 144, and position line set lines communication. Direct and redirect. So setting lines of 3 lines of course, centers lines of 0 gravity. Sets calculations and ground lines into 12 lines of gravity. Set position of 24 lines of gravity into 48, into 72, into 144 flux. And what you get in 144 flux, you're automatically in the metaphysical body. Understand that through tractions and setting. So it cancels out the line communication setting, height travels in point lines. Carbon, line course centers to silicone, cancel, delete, erase. Sets calculation line acceleration system, all through travel. Bracket lines of 3 travels, in point lines of 3 centers. 3 communication lines of 3 circles, 3 line position of 4 line settings, into 2 measure and scale of communication to setting to travel. Okay? Then you come into the watts of communication system, all through its intelligence. All right? Intelligence coming in frame. Setting travel point lines of graph, in line course centers, indirect signals to open ground centers of Earth, open ground centers of space, and modulation set correlation setting to travel. Directing ground centers, high lines of tubing, and platforms of communication lines of E factors or triangulation. See, the frequencies are way too high. Okay, I gotta show you. So platforms over lines, E factors over line constellation system, and cerebro, platform 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 lines of 8 lines of 12 and set locations. Short circuit. Johnny 5 alive. All right, center course centers, line travels, point lines of graph. Set calculations in a constellation system, all through travel. It looks like short circuit, because it is. All right, setting lines of sequence. Remember, everything comes in line course centers, in the lighting line centers. The operation line sequence puts all communication system all through energetic patterns, information lines and grounds as surface. Short circuit. Let's bring the I-line sequence into red in set lines. Communication ground centers, lines of surface and travel communication, operation set position. Calculate, modify, and travel communications. Okay? And then you see it on doors of recognition of time. See? There's the doors. All right, Plattooth. Oh, look at that. Disappeared. Whoa! What happened? Oh no! What's going on? I lost consciousness, awareness to its system. I had 2 red lines, screen adaptation, all the short circuit. Now it's out of sequence. Oh no! Line position of its I-line center. Then I got to color it in and line rotations back in tractions. Right? See, that's how you guys get out of control, in control of your systems. Right? Keeping consciously aware of what you're doing in settings. All set position. Right? All in balance. Bring it back into fail-safe. So it knows exactly where it is and line position location to its balance. Know how to direct and redirect your system, locate your settings in your 24 setting. Okay? But it's amazing how you saw it disappear and reappear, right? All right. That's controlling the mind. The higher you go, the more you come in the metaphysical line. You're in that position location travels. Without space, you don't exist. And that's what's not coming in position. The avatar now is in sequence to the ground lines, the universal system that's controlling every location setting into motivation system, which is in remote control, controlling all communication lines of your seconds, minutes, and hours, which is now in this frame. Setting position lines of 24 line settings, the process communications. So your formula equations are going to get more complicated, but a lot more fun now, because you're in the 24 grounds of center of everything, of a triangulation system. Okay? 12 centers lines of 1, 12 center lines of 2, and setting, right? Spatial modulation is the center of space and time, right? Center core system, clocking centers of 12 lines of measure and scale, right? Calculates 1 frame, 2 centers of travel, 3 set position, right? 2 line signals, setting communication lines into 1 line's communication to setting, all through tricorrelate setting of solar sails in both directions of set position. Okay? All right, so let's get into the 24 lines of pi and 13 lines of over lines as position over sequence. Okay, so we're going to get clocking centers line position. Now, remember, once you understand the more relation of the metaphysical line, you're in a 24 ground set location of a constellation system to your atmospheres, hemispheres, stratospheres. But it's all position locations of 24 grounds comes back and set operation your system. So through setting to the mind controlling your system through conception. The mind interpretation, how you see that through mind inception itself. Okay, so let's go in lines of 2 clocking centers. Okay. 24 sequence and center of operation both, and set tractions. All right, so let's get in set lines and height sequence. Height panels, operation lines, center location system. Remember, cancel 24. Crossing angles and X lines of box line frame communication lines of surface. Process indicates and setting into files of indication setting, 3 lines of measure and scale. Okay? Directing ground centers is a flux of 3 centers. Op lines is location of 3 lines of angles. Process lines of 4 line angles and communication setting. So we have pyramid 1, pyramid 2, inline centers of pyramid 3, and pyramid 4. Setting position of 3 platforms, and 3 track core centers. Position of 2 platforms and ceiling line adaptation of flux. 3 angles of point grass. Now the core centers, lines of travels, has a metric meter that scales to its satellite. Browse its indication setting, echo, and sonar, and line rotation system all through travel. Okay? Security defense, 3 centers of 3 line rotations, and webbing screen adaptations of flux over screen, adaptations over cross lines, and a 45 angle line rotation system of clocking center as set calculations. Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. All right. Modify your line signal location, what it's doing through measure and scale. Oh, look at that. Disappeared. You see it disappear? It was there, now it's gone. Boom. Now you understand how powerful it is, what you're not recognizing in conscious location awareness, and you're not mind controlling your system all through travel. That's what happens. Everything disappears. I'm showing you how powerful it is if you don't get control with your minds. And everything around you of consciousness. Things disappear in front of you. Because you're not identifying the frequencies of when you pick things up. And that's what happens. Everything disappears. You saw it disappear itself. Okay? In power of recognition of time center of sequence. How the I disappeared. Because it didn't recognize your frequencies. Because you didn't control your minds and surrender. And submit to its system and location of settings all through travel. Okay? Look at it. What happened to it? Whoa! It's all gone. It's not there anymore because you lost balance of where you are in your space and time. Then you got to do it all over again. All right, setting sequence lines of panels. We'll clock the system lines of travels. Now, what we're going to get are position lines of power lines, directing lines, energy lines, formation lines, screen lines, energy core, power line, power line, power line, power line. Set score lines of 3, 3, 3, and set core centers equals lines of 24 line cycle into wires of indications of brackets of 0 gravity and position lines of high gravity line rotations, gravitational pull slash lines and lines of triangulation lines, flux over screen, adaptations of Fibonacci and set position. Okay? Change ground centers of service locations. Is it still there in traction? Is it still there? It's still there, right? Nothing's missed. So your formula equations are going to get a lot more complicated, but make sure they're in position of balance, because if anything's missing, you got to start all over again in sequence. And that's why you have your fail safes in that location setting and trial. Set in sequence, back in panel, back in operation, back in set. Now you can continue, right? That's why you have your fail safe. Your fail safe is the button itself that you press in traction. Okay? You press it and puts everything back in neutralization. Continuous force in line position. See, it's all disappeared, but it's all line position back in itself, right? Because you're not understanding how to mind control. You're sending it to surrender and submit to its current. Because everything has its own current. You have your own current. But everything controls its own system. It controls its own time. You have to understand how to control your own time, what measures your scale and communicates your metaphysical time. So everything around you is controlling its own system. But for you to get control of that, like I said, is to surrender and submit to its current. Then you're in mind control of everything, right? But if not, everything around you disappears in tractions. You saw it disappear by itself. And you get in position, you saw the I disappear by itself, right? Despair, disillusion patterns, line condition setting, disassociation system, location of metaphysical grounds, and offline communication system all through travel. But I'm just showing you how powerful it is. It's not magic. It's just you're not connecting to its consciousness. You're not understanding its mind of travel. You don't understand the controlling system of your metaphysical bodies. Everything around you is metaphysical. Everything around you is intel of its metaphysical system. We live in the AVR system, right? Setting the atmospheres into virtual reality, into its set lines into readjustment. AVR, of course, centers into position lines of its mind. Okay. Of course, centers into set position lines of high position of 2 measured in scale, intelligence lines, networks, location of its direction. The mind itself is the alteration setting of space and time and measure of scale communication. All right? All right. Let's get into the pi now, about 24 o'clock. All right, so we have 24 center. Okay, so this is what you guys have to truly understand. If a 24 line center is set position here, this has to be 144. We already know that in sequence, right? That's the foundation of set position locations, 144,000 frequency, right? Okay, now we have to understand how to go through the indication system, all through settings. Process in position of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, process lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4. And set tractions, right? Position of 1, 2, 3, and position lines of 4, and then 1, 2, 3, and position lines of 4, and 1, 2, 3, position lines of 4, 1, 2, 3, and position lines of 4 and tractions. All line setting location, your time clocking location setting, right? Time measuring scales of 144 platform. Setting lines of sequence, the clocking course set location system all through 0. SATA, that's your flash drive. Your center drive is your main drive. Your main drive is correlation setting. Your panel drive, communication modulation setting. Oh, look, it disappeared. See? See? You're not paying attention because you don't understand the frequencies, right? Now we're in balanced position. XC1001 platforms, 3 angles, 3-point graphs, and 4 lines of measure and scale, right? That process communication of 24 clocking lines. Pi generation line, screen adaptation setting, process line indication system, all through center of operation sequence that put panels of communication in Fibonacci's in 3 centers of grounds and 3 set calculations of facades. 4 set position line to travel and flash drive into Saturn. All right, so correlate the time position of flux, 3 grounds of setting in flux over screen, and 3 set position of measure and scale. Process communicates setting over cross location setting to its pi, intelligence informations. 3 grounds of 1, process lines of 2 over line setting location in the system. Sets calculation lines at 1 center, 1 traction, 1 provision, 1 cycle. Set calculate modify. All right, so we set position locations of Pluto. Pluto comes in line screen adaptation setting. Process line core centers into high core center of security. Sets position location Mercury. Core centers lines of Jupiter. And direct correlations in Neptune. And 4 sequence lines of 4 communication lines of pi generation screen locations of box frames. Mainframe, track frame, center frame communication operation cycle. All through a set position location setting. That's all a 24 clocking system. All right? All right. How to see that in traction is knowing exactly how to go in that provision and set position lines of track communications, right? Directing lines, different lengths, different pattern, different operation, different frequencies all the time in settings, okay? Okay, so again, go through 24 clocking. I'm just showing you in different lines. Now we go through line position center operation, 3 angles. 3 indicates system all through travel, all right? Okay, 3 lines of flux, 3 lines of measure and scale, okay? Process lines of 2 lines of pi in direct sig locations. Compass over 1 and set lines of travel, okay? Overline sequence over cross location, line set locations of direct and reline set position of travel. Okay, so how we work a clocking center is a 24 ground center. So that's calculation lines of 24 grounds and set position of 24 lines of panels and 24 lines and set position of all walls, left and right in travel communications. Okay, then we add the course and line screen adaptation setting. That process lines of 3 over 2 in tractions, right? Set core lines and networks and 3 lines of C over traction. So remember, everything in the clocking system is constantly changing the frequencies. The inventories, the algorithms, the binaries, the core lines of track their location to its clocking system, all through 24 scale, all right? Setting 4 lines of sequence of 4 lines of pi in set positions, right? Calculate and modify 5 lines of sequence lines in high position of what? Seating and arrangements and H lines of screen, okay? Directing modification lines and navigation ground is a clocking center and high set course center location to its facade that operates a sig location system all through travel. Face recognition. Oh yeah. And that's what you're dealing with consciousness. Now once you understand the clocking centers, it comes in all position of its facades at 3 angles of 3 travel communication systems all through travel. And this is all done through a 24 clocking center. All through a 24 clocking center. Okay? So, all through a 24 clocking center. All through a 24 clocking center. But it's not there anymore. Because you're not in mind control of your system and the multi-levels that you live in division location and settings. All right. So that's what it is. When things disappear, you know, you don't understand what's going on through its angles of its point graph communicates the setting, how you see lines of 4 angles in the position of center operation. Everything goes back in the center. You're the pivotal point that controls everything in moderation. Okay? You are in the center that never leaves. You control everything of flux and set position, right? So what you understand, mind controlling setting of center operation system all through clock and centers of 24, right? Or 48, or 72, or 144. But you're doing it through your imagination. What you're doing in travels in that position location you're setting. But you're coming into all levels of what you aren't and coming into all levels of what you always are. So when time doesn't come into existence, it comes into existing already in set position. The mental capacity, the meta capacity, the psychological, the psychosis, the emotional, and the spiritual capacities. That process the time frame and now, of course, centers in line communication setting. So you're not in this anymore, okay? You're in 144 platform in the center in a 24 clocking scale. That's where we are right now. Center operation, flywheel, travel in position of 88. Okay, sending grounds of 3 centers and travels in position location of 3 scales. Okay, that's where we are right now. Your clocking center is only 4 lines of sequence. So you got a center lines of 2 lines of pi and 4 lines of communication lines of position of file. All right, so you understand the ground centers in 144 flux in 4 set position. 24 angles, clocking centers of 1, clocking centers of 2, clocking centers of 3 in travel. Okay, set grounds of the earth and set lines into all position location setting. Crop circles, all line direct signals of 3 circuits in set position. Okay, now that's a 24 clocking system. Everything I'm showing you is a 24 line of schematics, all through facades of face recognition skies. All right. All right, let's get in ground centers, location setting, and high position location measure and scale. Now, clocking system, right? Okay, so what's in that position to the setting, right? 6 and 6. So 6 plus 6 is 12 in set position operation, right? Setting course centers another 12 into another 12, sets position lines of high centers, 12 position location of 1, 12 position of 3, and 12 position of 0, okay? Sets calculation line, high center location lines of 12 times 2 in line centers, 2 lines equals lines of 6 over line, set triangulation of flux over screen, okay? Calculate modify lines of 1 angle, process lines of 2, set position over lines of screen, adaptation lines of pi. Process indication system. Remember, everything's a facade, everything's a face, everything's a clock. There's the time measuring lines of high position location, 12 lines setting the sequence lines of communication setting, the flywheel track communication lines of balance. Directing ground centers that compass over 1, compass over 2, light signatures of line patterns, 3 lines of angles, and set lines of travel. Directing ground lines and high lines of service located system of attractions. Okay? Set calculation lines, ground centers symbolism, 1 cross set lines, high set core centers, map and sequence line communications. All right? 24 clocking. All right, so that's what the team has to come into and travel. And the only way to do that is to understand the constant location is getting in mind control how you see a clock, how you see the seconds, minutes, and hours. All right, so in that position location, let's get into 12 seconds. What's that in lines of phone line, earth? Set position lines, equal lines, and set lines of 8. Okay, process lines of 3 in positions of 4. Standby and 7 in traction, right? That's your 7 body, right? 3 signals, 3 ground centers of surface, location of sonar. 4 signals, offline, inline, offline, rotation service, location of flywheel, track course, centers of dimensional sail. Setting E factors over E screen, 2 angles of point graph communications setting to your pyramids of 1, 2, 3, and 4 platforms of setting in travel communications to a system. Off the facade. Setting ground centers, high line, offline, setting line, rotation service, and travel in position, location, measure, and scale. Process indicates and setting, all through travel communication system, all through travel. Okay, flux over line, directing ground centers are 45 communication setting, highlights of surface. This is a 24 clocking system. All right, everything I'm doing is a 24, but the ground centers in position location, let's go with it again. 0 gravity, okay? Process lines, 12 signals, 12 centers, 12 rotations, 12 angles, and 12 point graphs as center communication 12 setting. Okay? So, understanding the metric meters of 4 lines of signals and rotation service and travel communications. All right? So, I've got 24 angles, 24 line rotations, 24 ground centers, 24 lines of zeros, 24 lines of security, and 24 provision location system. All through 24. This is a 24 clocking. But the platitude is always going to be at 144 balance in setting. Okay, so that puts position of 24, 48, 72, 144. Setting grounds of 1 in process of 3 and 4 angles of travel through pi. That's a 24 clocking system. All right, this is just 24. You guys are not in your 48 yet. Remember, this is all through metaphysical setting. Time measures and scales bounce out communication system. So if you're on the phone for 24,000 seconds, that's lines of triangulation, lines of 3, settings of 4, angles, point line, 7 on line, waiting signal, line position of XT 1000 line, frame line rotations, 4 measure, 3 scales, 3 communication setting, height, surface. All right, so setting grounds, calculate, modify, line travels, point lines, communication, offline, inline, outline, inline, travel. Okay? Sets communication setting to your Schumann residence and travel. There's your Schumann residence. Now, understanding scale, measure, and scale and box frames in that communication system all through travel. Okay, know exactly how to route the routers, screen adaptation of flux, or screen adaptation of setting. This is a 24 clocking system. So what am I doing? Why is it so important to understand a 12 o'clock and set chord standard lines of travel? Understanding the position location. So you got a 24 and setting lines of 13, set position of 14, set position of 15, and set lines of 6. So once you get into 6, okay, changes timeline, changes time coordinates, changes times of flux, changes times of measure, changes times of scale. So it's a half a pi, okay? That's a half a pi. And you already see it through face recognition. Boom, face recognition, the eyes, nose, locations, right? There's the face interaction, okay? Very powerful stuff. Understand the communication setting and high lines of travel. 4 clocking centers line communication northwest, south, and east. Process communication setting all angles and point lines of graph. So center core system is 1/6 of a frame, 1/6 of a frame line, and 1/6 lines of communication lines and box frame. Setting lines of travels. Correlates the setting of 6, 6, 6, 6. Set travels and point lines of graph. Center core system lines of settings. Process communication lines of 6/7, 7 lines of 8. Setting travel point lines of 9 and 10 lines of measure, and 11 and 12 communications. That's a 24 clocking system. See, 24, right? But the platform is 144, right? 144 is the frequencies that you guys always stay in grounds of, right? But that's a 24 clocking. Very complicated, very confusing, but it's a higher frequency settings and grounds. Okay, scales communication system all through settings. So let's go again, 24 lines. And setting the travel. This opens all setting location in your system, all through panels, operation location, their clocking location, setting travel. Flux over 3, sets calculations, right? Pi direct centers, position lines of space, set lines of grounds, and power line rotation lines of clocking location, right? All right, so you have 24 here, set calculation screens, in position of 13, 13 equals lines, 1 p.m. Okay? Now, understanding the clocking centers of 1300. 1300 line screens. Says calculate lines of 13 seconds over line, nanoseconds. So that's 1 hour, 3 minutes in space line. 1 hour, 3 minutes in space line, all through a 13 line setting. Rotates into a spin in position of 24 clocking in 1300 hours. Okay? So 1300 hours is one center. Sequence lines of 3 set correlations into its Fibonacci and the opposite direct signal location system all through travel. This is a 24 clocking system. Now, understanding your earth and how you speak and how you volume is basically understanding the mind conception of mind control. Directing ground centers. If you're in your earth line rotations, travel point lines of graph, okay, and you're walking, okay, 2 minutes, okay, to your destination. There's your house, right? So, very powerful stuff, right? So it takes you 2 minutes, okay? Your calculation setting, your avatar is already in pi waiting for you at the house. Your avatar is already there, boom, right? So the avatar is here now in set position inside of you, right? It's always going ahead of schedule now, right? So it's not attached, it's not tethered, but it's inside you now, travel. So it's a multi-level communications, multi-line set of line settings, reflect locations in Mandela, butterfly effect in real time, real measure and scale in 24 setting location setting, where it has to be an acceleration of light speed location system all through traction through all settings into its light years. All right. Sending sequence here. Okay. This is your connection system right here, instructions. All right. That's very confusing, right? So that's the body. That's the avatar. So the avatar is now controlling the setting. Okay. So the avatar is here and the body is here now. Back in sequence, back in time, right? Which means it's coming out of frame now, which means it's coming out of what it doesn't exist, of its existing, which is no time, right? That body is leaving, and the body itself is mutating its own mutation system of attractions of balance of yin and yang. Process indication setting of flux over line 8 setting a direct location system of travel. It's attractions. That's a 24 clocking system. Okay? Remember, guys, you have to extend the platforms of 24, 48, 72, and 144. You guys only know your 12 lines. You have to understand your 24 sequence, your 24 panels, your 20 operation line settings, setting core centers, addition, multiplication, subtract, and add. Directing setting locations. Addition is not the same as add. Okay? It's different. It's just trying to understand how to modify the system location codify. So add is not add because it's 3 different lines of communication setting, three different intelligence. Go is not go, okay? Go is the avatar in sequence. Go is not position. Go is just the avatar in setting balance of communication. So the avatar controls everything in the body, controls everything in time, controls everything measured, that controls everything in scale, that controls everything in balance through set and position, to its scale itself and travel communications of 2 settings. Balances the communications of platforms, balance communication lines of its earth, balance communication lines of center operation, balance communication lines of flux, balance communication lines of magnetic highway and center lines of travel, balances everything in triangulation system, all through tractions, all through direct location system, all through calculations, base recognition. See? You in the center. All right? How to operate the clocking centers and line screen adaptation. Again, this is 24 clocking. Okay? This helps you and guides you to understand what is going on with my provisions, to understand how to go through a 24 clocking centers and all lines calculations into 144,000 frequencies, right? You can change the scale, you can change the balance, you can change the clocking system, but I'm showing you so many different ways what a 24 clocking setting is in line position, existing all at once in set position on all levels. Clocking centers and communication, right? See, that's what you're not used to. You're used to this. This is a 12 clock. This is a 12 clock. Where's the other side? It's got to have a bottom. There's the 24, right? There it is, right? So, clocking centers, balance of communication, both sides interactions, right? Directing this way and directing this way over cross location, right? Setting ground centers in platforms over factors over 4 settings of travel. Directing calculation of 24 clockings. Now we get in position lines of 13, set position of 14. Now 14 is basically coming out of setting line communication setting, process into the avatar, set lines of the avatar in 15 sequence. 16 sets position locations. Now you're in your sim. So that sets calculation lines at half pi, which is all calc and modify. That modifies the location setting. That puts all communication setting modulation system locations into its wormhole. Okay? 1/6 lines of screen adaptation setting of flux. Okay? Half pipe. Full pipe is 24. All around and part acceleration, right? Half pipe is 1/6. 1 setting, 1 set position, 1 operation, 1 sequence. So understanding communication is all through tractions. You guys have to get out of time of everything now. So if you see 34 lines at 15, that's a time frame in live. Okay, 15 lines, you have to get out of time frame of everything in travel. So 15 is now 18. 2-point lines of graph is the center operation of facade. 4 centers is now 3, and 3 centers is now 12. All right, so that's 12 equals lines of 3 over setting, 3 over lines of face facade, location 18 lines of measure and scale. Right? So when you just have fun with it, you just modify the system. That's how you see quantification of this clock and setting, because everything has a clock and everything has a face, which is the facade itself. But you live in a metaphysical line in a 24 ground. Okay, this is not 24. Okay, that's not 24. Okay, 24 is at the top. 144 is where you are in set position, right? So you're at that frequency already. Directing that line, communication setting puts every lines of communication setting. How you see set lines of high position of 4 angles instead of communication of center operation, right? So you're clocking your settings in set position, right? So you're looking in this direction. This direction is the 2 settings. You're looking in this direction, and this direction is the 4 settings. You're looking at this direction, and 6. And you're looking in this direction, location lines of 8. And you're looking in the center operation of U. You're in the platform of center, looking in all direct location system all at once. And set directions. Okay? So you're looking at 3 angles of 1, 3 angles of 2, 3 angles of 4, and 3 angles of 5, and 3 angles of 6, 3 angles of 8, 10, 12, 24, 48, 72, 144 angles all at once. All at once in all directions. All right, so you guys are now in 16 lines, millimeters per frame, nanos per second, setting minutes and line condition setting, nanos and minutes, setting course centers and position of hours and frame. Sets communication lines of 24. Now we have to understand how to use it through all measure and scale, right? Setting calculation lines of high position of 13 and position of 14. Let's start there and stop there in tractions, right? 13, 14, right? All right, so high south sets course centers of high line screen, adaptation and setting. Sets travels in point lines of graph communication to its eye system, location to its system, all through 1 center, so travel at 13 measure. Calculation lines of platforms over flux over screen adaptation of center operation set tractions. Directing ground centers, high line sequence location setting, okay, sets tractions. All right. Setting measure and scales of flux over line, directing lines, position location system, all through H line track and position of 5 measure. Correlates the timeline sequence, clocking centers of 1, and clocking centers of 14, clocking centers of 24, and clocking centers of 144 platform and set tractions. All right. Set calculation lines of center, 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 and 4 set lines of sequence. Set position operation lines of setting. And that communication setting highlights the surface. This is a 24 clocking system. So as long as you're in 24, you're fine. Now, if in that position you want to change the measure, 24 here, okay, 48 is on standby, out space, right? That outer spectrum lines, course centers of 3 lines of 4 over lines. CCTV, course centers of 3 lines of flux over scale. Seth calculates lines of modification line, course centers, line communication satellites, modems, Wi-Fi's, and towers. All right. So 24 lines, 48 goes here, and 24 cancels out. So 24 goes down to 16 lines of anomaly. Set lines of position of pi. Coordinate calculation lines at dimensional scale and scale communicates setting and position nanoseconds, minutes, and hours. Frames communicates in setting high position 48 lines of measure. Take 48 lines, brings 72. Cancels out the 48, brings the 72. Set position lines on high position location, cancel out the 72, comes in 144. Sets platforms of communication. Now you're in the balance of the grid at set position. Set calculation lines to its energetic dome and position of process lines, direct and redirect. Setting course centers, line direct signals. Now using 24, 48, 72, and 144. Setting lines of nanoseconds in position locations to nanominutes and to nano hours. That changes the timelines of collapsing timelines. Your center lines of Earth, your operation lines of Earth, and your center operation course centers are your minds of your Earth. 3 center course centers of 3 travels. Constellation setting is a 12 scale, process lines of 12 measure. Sets calculation screen lines adaptation system, adds flux lines, screen lines adaptation setting. So coming in time sync lines, set position of 24 scale, okay, into 13 screens, into 14 over here. Now it gets tricky, right? Because you can change the time frame, right? That's time jumping. 13 lines over 1 lines of 4, right? Set lines of 4 back into 2 over lines, setting lines of 1 and back into 24 in sequence in Fibonacci. Process the indication system. That's where you go in timelines, is timeline, position, location, and part acceleration setting, vortex, time leap, time jump, line communications into all of this coming into jump scar. 2 angles of point lines of graph, 1 line signals, 13 ground communication setting to travel. So you said that Fibonacci is going one way and the other way, and set lines of communication setting, creating a portal. Sets course centers, kaleidoscope communication lines of Q of mic, and direct signal lines of grounds. High lines of service sets all offline communication system all through travel. Okay, This is a 24 clocking system, right? See, that's what it is in travel. That's 24. Everything I'm giving you is a 24. Even if I had the 48, 72, 144. So basically, I'm putting everything on standby. When you put things on standby, it's in stillness. XE1000 stillness. It's a hum that indicates the system location, echo, and sonar. If you get an XT1000 platform of 4 centers and 3 lines of travel, sets calculation lines of grounds. Okay? Calculate modify overline sequence over calculation setting of location grid. Directing grounds inside inline rotation setting of travel. 3 signals, 3 grounds of set lines of high position of clocking. Directing ground centers into 4 lines of measure and scale of communication. Directing ground centers in operation line sequence and Fibonacci setting in travel communications. Very complicated stuff. So ground centers line position all levels, clocking center location sending all set lines of travel. Directing ground centers high lines of set position location measure and scale. Okay? So in that position in all through track correlation setting is knowing exactly what you're doing in your 24 scale communications. Okay? This is a 24 clocking. So if you get a true understanding how to modify this, then you understand how to basically, okay, I'm in the Earth line rotations of film projector lines of 1. If I'm in position of 13 hours, that's 13 years in space travel. Now, what you have to understand, that's 13 years through pi. You went from here to here in 13 years and setting at 24,000 grounds. Zero gravity, acceleration in position, light speed into light years. So that's travels in point lines of graph. That puts you in position already to pi of generation. So you went through all position lines of 4 signals, 4 centers, 4 travels, and 4 communication system, all through calculation, all through track locations. Okay? Now, transits over divots sets lines of ground correlation setting and highest travels. Directing ground centers has a 45 angle and position lines of platform of communication. Set calculation lines of 1 signal over cross location of 2. Process lines over 3 line signals, process lines of 4. Sets the scales communication lines of setting in position of process over cross location inside outline, setting quarter line channels, process indicates and setting of flux into a Fibonacci setting and swirls of communication system, all through the lines of nobulation setting and travels in 1/6 lines of pi. Okay? There it is. There's the travel communications. Okay? Very complicated stuff, right? This is a 24 clocking. See how complicated it gets? So understanding the 24 scale, guys, is understanding through a metaphysical line how it lives its reality in a 24 grounds. Okay, this is the center operation. The 24 grounds is here, guys. Your Earth is here. Okay, not here. Okay, that's zero gravity. Okay, so your Earth is here, right here. It's an outer space line. It's in line rotation system. All through traction. That's 24, right? Okay, this is zero gravity of the Earth itself. Okay, and you got 2 operation lines of panels, set lines of right, set lines of left, and travel communications, so clocking settings. All right, and then you got your tubes and travel communications, one set position one to another. And then you got your cross angles, which is your flux upper line, north, east, west, and south, and travel communications. Right? So position lines, sets lines of 13, set position of 14, set position of 15, 16. Now we're in the avid set position all levels, crossing line into the sim of modifications, overlooking and settings of what we created in process of communication and clockings of the simulation. Okay? You're here in the center operation. In subtractions. Okay? So your Earth is here in the 24 clocking now. Right? This is your calculations, your black holes, wormholes, portals, and communications out of your stargates. Set the line left over right, right over left. Directing signals, direct, and redirected signal location setting all through pi. Calculate and modify to an energetic dome line rotation of a system through a system of tractions. Directing ground centers, this is zero gravity of the Earth. Okay? But all is online course centers and metaphysical. Setting travels, point lines of graph, cloak and dagger, off cross line screens, adaptation to its system location come into its map. changing the frequency location to a system all through tractions. Okay? Crossing angles, all through set position, all through tractions. Okay? This is a 24 clocking system. Okay? And you bring it in. All right? There's the map. Okay? You bring it in. Booyah. Simulation. See? Everything is the simulation setting already set up for you guys. Right? So, I mean, the way I've shown you guys is to understand how to see everything of a 24 line of the Earth line rotation, which is above the system location, which is outline state locations, your infinities, out of 8 lines of sequence coming to position location or polarities, how to use that server located system all through portals of stargates, all through travel. Okay, very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun, right? So understanding the 1300 hours, set location lines, 1300 hours, 3 zeros and tractions, brackets over lines of 3, right? 3 signals, crossing angles and 3 lines of two communications of sonar, position lines of travels. Once you understand your 24 lines, you can get triangulation lines of 1. Cross lines and line communications setting a flux over lines of waves. Sets course centers, directing signal lines of 0, travel, point lines of 0, process lines of signal, process lines of ground calculations. Set course centers, there's the 4. See the 4? There's a 4 line. Then we do travel lines of point lines of graph and solar sail and travel communicates the setting. And then set the facades of face directions of time centers and set directions. Okay, the open line sequence, open lines of panels and set position. The I central line communicates set up this way in 3 angles of communication. Okay? Sending direct signal looking this way and looking that way at the same time measure and scale and set tractions. One setting signals in opposite direct signal location setting and travel communication system. Sending travels at point lines of graph offline inside rotation system and 4 angles of all communication setting all through calculations. All right? This is a set position of a 24 clocking system. See? Everything I'm doing is a 24. You guys are not in your 48 yet. Until you understand 13 line settings at 1300 hours, 1400 hours, 15, all the way up to 24. Once you get at 24, it cancels out the 24, then you automatically come into 48. But you only can do it through the metaphysical line, the ground core centers. Because without time, you don't exist. That's what's leaving the system of the body itself. They change the communication system off the travel, where the avatar controls everything through modification setting through time course that puts every location of balance in line communication system off the travel. So stop seeing everything through time and start to codify through your own system. That's where you get in position location, how you see yourself through your imaginations. That puts you in all lines of all communication setting, how you see that attractions, right? So if you're 20 minutes on the phone, on the Earth-line rotations of its Earth itself, that modulates the system location to its universal system, location to its galaxies, the universes, the process of communication setting is the inner force, which is the outer force. The inner spectrum is the outer spectrum core center location of space and time through all lines of 3 lines of signal location of 4. That process lines communication lines of question that executes and runs the platforms that travel in that communication setting metaphysical system that you are in location of its clogging location of its foundations. This opens up more communication setting, how to process that in that position location setting. But I showed you so many different versions how you clock your system on a 24 ground setting location of its Earth and set tractions. Okay? That's it. I'll see you guys in 5.